Good to know. Because
I
that's
love it.
been a question that's divided the Zeppelin crew. It like divides us right in half almost of like the people
Well, you
that are
got the
like,
soap tasters, the people who think it tastes like
yes,
soap.
yes. So there's those folks, and then there's the reasonable folks, I like to say. Team cilantro. And so far, most of the people that have come onto the show have been Team Cilantro too. So I'm curious to know where all these other people who don't like it are. But we'll see. Awesome. Cool. Well, we are live officially everywhere. Thank you so much for everybody for tuning in. This is our show called the Design Annotation Live, where we talk to trendsetters who are building and designing beautiful products. And today we have with us Brian. Brian, if you want to go ahead and tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, we'd love to get to know you.
Yeah, so as you said, my name is Brian. I'm a child of immigrants. My parents come from Nicaragua, so I'm Hispanic.
Awesome.
I currently work and lead the design systems at the Washington Post. And yeah, that's pretty much what I do.
Fantastic. What does the average day to day for you look like in this role?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of context switching, but it keeps things interesting. So I'm constantly like maybe switching around. So a day could look like syncing with the team on system projects, what we're working on, whether that's the dev team or designers. So we're kind of talking about those things, maybe previous conversations following up. If I'm not doing that, then I'm working with feature teams, maybe coaching, mentoring, thinking about process, technical considerations, handoff process, Figma and Zeppelin best practices, and as well as like application of our design system. And if I'm not doing that, I'm syncing with leaders and, at the leadership level, or I am planning, planning for the future, trying to not always be reactive. So our design system team could be a bit more proactive, if not retroactive in some instances.
Awesome. Very cool. I like the fact that you specifically called out that you work with both designers and developers, because I think that's a huge part, obviously, not just of design, but specifically design systems. Do you think that design systems are like the great uniter between the two disciplines? Because I feel often there's that, that age old story of like designers versus devs. Do you think design systems is the
Yeah.
way to bring them together?
I do believe heavily in design systems, and I don't just say that because I work in it, but I do believe in a sense that like it is a bridge, right? Like system thinking is not something you regularly would do when you're working on like very feature focused niche, but systems really thinks and plays a part of like the language that we're trying to share across both designers and developers. So I find a lot of people or peers in design systems are either dabble in code or familiar with very much the code that they're working in, and same with developers who dabble in design, very particular into the language. So I think it's a great bridge, and it does fill in a lot of the gap where maybe designers are not necessarily called to fully dive into like system or componentry specifically, but it does help bridge that gap there. Yeah.
Awesome. I love to hear that. That's a good sign for the future, I think, because there are so often there's a question that we've asked sometimes before of like, do you think designers need to learn how to code? Do you think developers need to learn more design thinking? And I think the general consensus is like there should be a general shared knowledge between everybody where it's like you don't need to know the in detail of what the other person's doing, but you need to know
Yeah.
enough to be able to have that context and communication too. So awesome to hear that you're a big proponent of that. We have Arturo on LinkedIn, tuning in from North Carolina. So a little Harmony
Shout out to
reunion.
Arturo.
Yeah, we got a little Harmony reunion from your chat, from your both chat in 2022. So that's awesome to have.
Yeah.
Also, I'm excited to learn more about who you are too, just as a designer. So if you could maybe point to one thing or one person, who or what would you say is your inspiration when it comes to design?
I think you speak to me a few years ago, I would have said like nature. I was really into like
Mm,
nature photography, mountain biking. I just enjoyed it and found a lot of joy out of pulling out of inspiration from nature. But I had a son, I got married, and I don't get to go out as often as I used to. So I found actually a lot of my inspiration coming from my son. I mean, I think it's just so nice. Like we'll go for a walk in the park, and he'll stop and be like, "Oh, daddy, look, hormiga," which is like Spanish for ant, and he just sits there and looks at it. And I think like that sense of wonder and whimsical, like what I felt like was so gone for me, is like he's like speaks to my inner child and just kind of inspires me to just you know, uh, dig deeper, be more creative, be more bold, be comfortable with myself. And I get to be really silly with him and do a lot of make believe. And I think it really has inspired me a lot in both my work to do more, but as much as like as a provider, as much as someone creative.
I love that. Congratulations on both of
Thank
those
you.
accomplishments for you too. That's amazing too that you know you're talking about like the whimsical, bring back that fun nature too. I think that's a big part that a lot what makes good design, in my opinion at least, is like when you can tell the people who are making it are having fun while they're doing it, or like, oh, this is going to be a fun little Easter egg that we can pop in there too. So that's awesome. Very cool. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
Could you maybe tell us a little bit about your journey in design systems? You know, like how you started, where you're versus where you're at today. A little bit on that path
Yeah,
there.
I mean, how I started for those who, if you heard me talk or whatever, I think definitely I started as an architect. Like my discipline in design, and I was an architect. I worked for years there on hospital designs, particularly cancer
Okay.
research centers, big medical centers, and there was a lot of intricacy there that I worked, and I found it fell in love with architecture because it was both design and science and technicality, like all kind of merged together. So I spent time there, working on ORs and how does that tie to central sterilization and pharmacies and how do we control substances. So it was really interesting and just I got my brain going. And I also run a freelance agency for quite some time now,
Oh, nice.
and I had a chance to work with a lot of different startups and proof of concepts and things like that. And I built out systems in that either for myself to move faster, but as well as like for other teams. And so having the kind of opportunity to work at the Washington Post with an amazing team, we were able to just kind of come together and really see the need for a design system. We really went past the, should we build one? We were like, no, let's just do it. And designers and engineers came together and were like, let's do this. And we built up some really great system that we're still evolving, and so I found myself just in the position as both a developer in the mindset as much as a designer to be that space where I could help mitigate some of the, talking this way, talking that way. We find a common ground. So my journey was maybe not as orthodox as some others. Like I didn't necessarily, go directly to design systems, but it was something that was always kind of built into me as like both scratching both sides of my brain type of thing.
I love that. I think that's interesting. An interesting parallel, at least that I'm drawing from that too, is the field of design systems and design ops. Oftentimes, sound like they're pretty similar. You know, like the connector, that bridge, like you had mentioned earlier too. Are there a lot of parallels between them? Do you have a design ops function at Washington Post, or do you feel you're sort of more in that role?
Yeah, I know I have a partner that we've kind of built up operations here. It's a small piece. It's like myself and another designer, TJ, and we've kind of worked to build up like a lot of the operations that we do here at the Post. I would say there's a lot of crossing, overlap, but not necessarily like design systems is ops or ops is design systems. They just happen to be like I'm building out maybe the componentry library in Figma just as much as I'm looking at operations and handoff in Zeppelin. And so we are looking at all those things, and it's really just like the smoothness and the joy of doing work, right? Like as opposed to the labor of doing work. And I find that both of those are trying to solve some part of the problem there. Sorry, some part of the problem there to actually speak or maybe make it easier for either the designers or developers in that maybe crucial moment of handoff.
Awesome. I love that. That was I love when I'm doing these calls because I can always like in my head when you're saying something I'm like, oh, that's going to be a great soundbite. That was fantastic. So thank you very much for
Cool.
for sharing all of that. It's great to hear. I'm gonna move on into a quick little section before we get back into the questions where I like to call overrated or underrated, where I'm just going to throw a few terms at you and you can tell me if you think they are overrated or underrated, and maybe a little bit about why too. So we'll
Okay.
start off easy with you. We'll start off with a few fonts. So the first font is Inter. Do you think Inter is overrated or underrated?
I'm gonna say underrated, and only in the sense because I know like Enter is like the default you get when you open Figma, and people are probably
Mhm.
like, I'm not using this and like skip it. But it's a pretty powerful font. I mean, I have a lot of respect in terms of the weights in there and just kind of like how it carries a lot of the work even in Figma. So I would say underrated. Yeah.
Underrated. Good, good. Next one is Helvetica, the one that I think is like the OG font. Like for non-designers, that was like the one that I've known and heard of aside from Times New Roman. So Helvetica,
Yeah.
underrated or overrated for you?
I'm gonna say overrated. Definitely overrated. It's like, is it that much different than some of these newer ones? Yeah, it's overrated for sure. Yeah, I think
All right, good to know.
you
Good
can
to
hit
know.
me
On
in the
the left,
chat.
That's all right. I think the general consensus is that Helvetica has sort of had its time, and well, maybe
Okay.
we'll see. Maybe in 10 years there'll be like a big resurgence of like, oh my gosh, why did we ever stop using this font? Like I feel like everything is very cyclical. So who knows? We'll do the same call in 5 years and see what you think. Last font for you is Papyrus. Do you think Papyrus is overrated or underrated?
I would say underrated. Like if it's used in the right application, I think what Avatar uses it or
Yep.
something. Yeah, like if it's used right, I mean, I think it has a lot of speaks a lot of volume. But if you use it wrong, maybe it doesn't look so great. But yeah, I think underrated in terms of like its potential impact on like a design. It carries a lot of weight.
I love that. That was funny that you mentioned that Taylor Cashin. We had him on too, and he was like, if you're using it at like a fifth grade presentation to talk about like ancient Egypt, it's fantastic. But like if you use it in the wrong context, it's terrible. So good to know. Context is important there. Next one for you is skeuomorphism. Do you think that's overrated or underrated?
It's making a resurgence, right? Like it's coming back.
Yeah.
I think at a time it was overrated. Right now, underrated. Like I've seen some really great designs, some really awesome animations using skeuomorphism. There's a lot to explore there. So underrated right now.
Good to know. Good to know. And next one is flat design.
I think it's reaching it's already reached its peak and maybe on its way down. Overrated, like we tend to just go flat first because it's just what's so familiar in the modern web. But yeah, I'm really interested to see how skeuomorphism kind of pushes that back.
Awesome. We do have one question from Arturo. He mentioned thoughts on Franklin.
Frankly,
And I don't know
I
what this
love it.
means.
That's
Yeah.
our font at the Washington Post. I love it, and there's nothing wrong with it.
Fantastic. It's perfect as is. And the last thing for you is artificial intelligence, AI, machine learning, overrated or underrated?
It is. I'm gonna say underrated, but with like an asterisk. It's overrated in the sense that like we're in the hype cycle. I mean, let's be real.
Mhm.
Everybody's saying AI can make you a sandwich tomorrow, right? But that's probably not true. But underrated in terms of like we don't know the level of impact it's really gonna drive in our industry or everywhere really. I'm awaiting to see that. So underrated in terms of its potential because people have now written it off as like it's all hype, but maybe there's something there.
Good to know. Good to know. Speaking of that too, that's a great little segue into my next question for you. Have you used any AI workflows, any tools in your workflow currently? Are there any ways that you're augmenting that with, even just coming up with like bouncing ideas off of somebody? Because that's what we've heard some before sometimes too. But I'm curious to know if you've ever explored any of those workflows yourself.
I'm actually AI. And it's like, whoosh, it comes out. Now, yeah, I definitely use it. I think I've explored it and from like the tooling set. I mentioned I was an architect in a previous
Mhm.
life. So like I've used these tool called Leonardo AI and they have a little
Okay.
sketch tool and they do renderings and I thought it would be really neat if I just drew a sketch and how real it can make my house or whatever I'm designing look real, and it does a really great job. It's amazing in terms of that. So I use them like on a personal for like a lot of creative reasons.
Mhm.
Maybe at work I might use it to like help my English. It's not so good sometimes. So like I'm just like really not the greatest writer, or like maybe I don't speak as well as much as I write, and so I just use it sometimes to kind of formulate my thoughts. Like if you look at my notes,
Sure.
nobody would understand it, but for some reason AI can help understand what I'm trying to get at, and then I'll refine a lot of those pieces. So it's a great editing tool. I don't use it for any design particular inspiration yet, mostly because I always seem to get the same results when I try to do those things. But I don't know, maybe it's a data set. I don't know.
Yeah, very very interesting take on. I appreciate you sharing all of that. That's great. Do you think there are any practical applications now, specifically with design systems? Like, are you seeing any ways that you might want to start thinking of integrating that into your current work, or like what would you? I guess if or a different question for you, if you could wave a magic wand and make any AI for you for your purposes at Washington Post Design Systems, what would it be?
I would say AI should empower us to move away from the mundane and allow us to do like the core work, like the things that we're really interested in and the impact that requires a lot more critical thinking at a human level. So I would really want it to answer the questions that we've answered 600 times already. So like,
Mhm.
people come into our chat, we have like a Slack channel, people come in answering whether it's a dev or a designer, and we've answered it a couple of times, whether not to the same person, but just like someone different who didn't read the chat before. Um, it would be great if AI could just like actually be a good help bot and just answer some of these things by learning from what we've already said and like telling, hey, here's what you can read more about this, or here's an answer that we said in the past. I believe like something like that. I know there are bots out there that exist, but from our kind of experimentation, they're not the greatest yet. So really getting that training to be like very specific to your product and answering those questions. I know a lot of design system teams would love that. That's just like a help because if we're not designing and building, we are doing a lot of support, and I think that support can sometimes take a lot of your day.
Yeah, awesome. Very cool. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Speaking of those folks that are asking the questions, some of the people that are maybe newer to the field of design systems, what's sort of like the best way to break into design systems nowadays? Like, how would somebody who's interested get started in the field?
I definitely think in this day and age, like I know it's really hard in our industry and just across the board. So like networking is for one. I think there
Mm,
are a lot of great communities out there that are run. Design System Wednesdays is one that is run. I don't know if you heard of it, but like there's folks at Clarity who have like design systems Slack channels. It's really great just to connect with people, talk with them, learn from them, study other people's design systems. But as a designer, if you're already in the field and you're looking to make a switch or even build your own system, I think make it a habit to zoom out, right? A lot of times you are a feature team, you're really focused on like your specific project and make it a habit to zoom out. And what I mean by that is if you're working with other designers, look at their work, look at their patterns, look at their inputs, how they're doing things, and figure out where you can find parity. Where is that real kind of connection? And the more you start thinking in that terms of reusability, modularity, patterns, and looking to resolve these things, you start thinking at the system level where you make a change to maybe an input on your design. You might think, well, how does this impact like 6 or 7 different things that we're working on? So zooming out is a skill set that if you're very much interested in design systems, you need to be able to do, like be able to zoom in and zoom out at the right moments. So that's something I think very much so as a skill set would be very helpful for any design system team you join. But networking is probably the best way to break in. Literally, somebody has an opportunity out there, and they're going to
yeah.
give you a shot.
Yeah, get your foot in the door and then start doing the work yourself to get your knowledge up to that level too of what you said. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing because I think the experience specifically that you shared about the feature team versus design systems team and the just like the different way of thinking, I think is huge. So
Mhm.
I really appreciate you sharing that. Thank you very much. Looking to the future, what does the future for design systems look like in your opinion? Do you have any thoughts or predictions about where the field will be?
Yeah, I think about like uh, a lot of different things for design systems. And one talk that really spoke to me that I see, just based on how we're all reaching for similar things. So what I mean by that is Brad Frost gave a really great talk about like the global design system. He's like, why build out 600 different accordions or 600 different buttons or inputs when we're all building like similar things and then skinning them. I do think that there's a world, agnostic of frameworks and agnostics to like maybe specific platforms. We're really talking about the tokenization of components, maybe if that makes
Mhm.
sense. So if we think about like tokens are attempting to be agnostic and exchange data across different types of mediums, whether it's the tooling you're in or the site or the platform or the product that you're working in. And you can use those tokens as just data that's being transferred to share. That's like a decision made by a bunch of people. Our components, I think, at a global level, if everybody's reaching for the same React library, the same, kind of unstyled libraries out there and building on that, or even just building your own thing, you end up building similar interactions, right? If you think about a select, I think right now there's probably like 10 or 12 different ways that I've seen it done. But I hope in the future that we're spending less time of like the interaction, maybe specific pattern, and more about the impact of that select on your product. So that might include a little bit of the visuals, but less so maybe the UX to a big degree. That's going to be such a different differentiator. And I think that seems to be happening if you think about like the standard HTML inputs are like on the web. Like we're slowly getting to a place where everything is supported, like date and time and all these other things aren't necessarily like the same across the browser, but we're hoping we can get there. And so I would hope for the same as like what Brad is talking about, like spend less time on these things that are a bit trivial in a sense that like we're just building not reinventing the wheel, but like building the wheel again, right? Let's just
Yeah.
get past that and really talk about the impacts of how a system can affect a product.
I really like that idea, especially it reminds me almost of like open sourcing the model where you can have a greater impact on specifically accessibility. Because I think that's another big topic that I know I've seen talked about quite frequently is the accessibility of, design systems, of just design in general. And I would imagine, if we were to get to that point where we do have a central repository where you can take everything from like everything would be intentionally made to be accessible. Like I think that would be a fantastic way to start from zero, and build up
Yeah,
from there.
because accessibility is hard. I mean, even in our team, like, you don't always get it right. And so we rely on like these tried and true open source libraries that have been tested for accessibility because it's a safer option. I mean, you want it to be accessible for your user. And if you're trying to solve that on your own, there's room for a lot of error. So like more minds, the better, and more tests, the better, right?
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Thank you very much for sharing all of that. I wanna get back to your experience too, specifically at Washington Post. Could you maybe tell us about the biggest win that you ever had with the design system at Washington Post, or like what was your best, like your best moment where you look back on it and you're like, yes, this was the most impactful thing that we did. I'm super proud of that. We'd love to hear that.
Uh, so at design systems, like, are like a child. So I love everything that we've done. I mean,
Of
everyone has like
course, of
impacted, but
course.
if we think about like a decision that I think really shaped our design system, you mentioned open source, like our design system. If our GitHub repository is open, you can go to our Figma library. You could see our library. We have icon asset all open, and we did that strategically as a way to really challenge ourselves to be independent of not necessarily the product cycle, but maybe just like product specific thinking and impact. And if you talk to design system teams, a lot of the slowdown sometimes that we feel is like we're getting bogged down by some things that are not necessarily system related. And so, myself and Arturo, who's on the call here, we made a decision to say, like, let's open this up so everybody's going to see it. So we're going to really challenge ourselves to avoid putting like proprietary business logic in here
Mm,
and really think about how this works at a very foundational level. And that has really shaped a lot of our decisions moving forward, has really opened up how we think about our design as much as our development here at the Post. And really just we wanted to contribute to this really great narrative that's happening out there around like here's how we're doing it, like help shape this as much as we are shaping your work. And it's been really great, a really great response. And I enjoyed that a lot, so I'm happy we made that decision. It was like a huge win for us because we were able to move so much faster. If we didn't do that, we probably wouldn't be moving that fast.
that's awesome. That's very cool. I hope that anybody else watching too will be able to take some inspiration from that, be able to dive into your docs and see what's going on in there too. Because there's one thing, like if I had one takeaway from the design systems community, it's that everybody loves to help each other. Like it's such a collaborative and really cool environment that is built online. Like the community there is fantastic. So I'm really happy to hear that there's a company like yours, people like yourself who are at these larger companies who are able to share everything what they're working on too. So very cool. Thank you very much for sharing.
Yeah.
And my final question for you is, what do you think the biggest challenges facing design systems teams are today? Is it adoption? Is it buy-in? Is it like what would you say?
I think a lot of people are still struggling at the buy-in level. It's kind of it's weird. Like design systems have grown a lot. I think in terms of both the formation of the idea of even having a design system team to just even design systems in general. And so the pitch and all these other things. Like I've seen so many talks from like Dan Mall and a bunch of other people who have like been in this space talking about like, how do you pitch a design system. And I think that's still a huge challenge that because design systems are, we would say it's hard to measure or quantify sometimes our impact, but it's a huge impact in terms of quality of work, quality of life, a lot of these other things. It's still really hard for people to comprehend because they're still fresh to maybe some of these higher up executive level folks who are like maybe like we don't have enough resourcing for you to do that,
Mm.
so we can. And so I think teams are still struggling with that, and it's a huge challenge to go over. Even for ourselves, we didn't necessarily have the blessing per se to do it. Like we went a little rogue and just went and did it. But sometimes you don't have the luxury to do that, right? Because you have a lot of other projects that you're working on. So I would still say that's a huge challenge, and I'm hoping in the future, design systems will be a staple, whether at different sizes and at the right size, where it's not really a thought. It's almost like well, obviously I will use a design tool to make my handoff, or obviously I'll use a handoff tool like Zeppelin or obviously I'll use React or whatever it is. It just becomes something that we do regularly, and we're not talking about like, let me pitch you why we should have the same button on every page. It's just like, why not? Let's just do it.
Yeah. I love that there's still, because that's honestly one of my favorite ways to affect change is like ask for what's the saying, ask for forgiveness, not for permission. And that's awesome that you did it, and it's had such a great impact on the business too. So I appreciate you sticking to what sticking to your beliefs in that way, and really making
Yeah.
something that's very impactful for not only just your organization but for others out there too who are looking in on what you're doing. So
Yeah,
awesome.
go
Very cool.
rogue.
Yeah. that's the
Just don't
biggest
come to
takeaway.
me when you get in trouble.
Go rogue. Brian is not responsible for anything that
Caption shows
that
up.
is resultant of that. Yeah, we'll do the little like commercial voice narrator over there. Awesome. Well, thank you very much. Those were all the questions that I had for you, specifically about who you are and what you do. So thank you very much for powering through all those, giving us some great answers there. I've got a few rapid fire questions for you here. And the very first one comes from our LinkedIn feed, asking, have you ever seen the movie The Post with Meryl Streep and Tom Hanks?
No, I have not.
No? Okay. Well,
I
there
probably
you go.
should. I'm a native to DC and all these other things. I probably should, but I have not.
All right. Maybe it'll go on your movie list this
Yeah,
for the rest of
I'll
the
put
year.
it
We'll
on
see.
there.
We'll see. Awesome. My next question for you is, if you had to guess, how many rectangles have designers created?
Wow. Is this designers like including like before computer age, like
Before computers ever? Yeah.
some
All
guy in
designers.
like caveman drawing a
Yep.
rectangle? Okay. I don't know, man. We're probably talking. It's got to be upwards in the billions, right? Like 800 billion rectangles or more. I don't know, because like if you think about folks draw, I come from architecture, and rectangles are probably like the main thing you start with, when you're drawing out these things, and then you think of like how facades and ornament. Yeah, I don't want to get into it, but like I think there's a lot of rectangles out there, and now I don't know. I probably draw like 600 rectangles a day just on Figma, just trying to show something really quickly. So yeah, the more disposable it is, I think the more there'll be. So I'm gonna go with 900 billion.
900 billion. Good. And I appreciate the Price is Right specific answer, because we've had answers ranging all the way from like a couple million all the way through like infinity. So I'm always like, no, we got to go more specific. What is your specific answer? So when we do find out the question, I'll comb through all these interviews and be like, you got it right. We're gonna send you a prize.
Okay.
So
I
yeah,
love it.
maybe something coming. If you could describe your design system in just 3 words, what 3 words would you use?
I would say a functional first. Like we subscribe to functional first. I would say fun in terms of our team. Like the folks who we all are contributing to this, something that's a shared community. So it feels fun in terms of like not a laborious. It's more of a labor of love. And the last would be, I would say, impactful. It has been a huge impact in terms of the way we're thinking about design and development here at the Post. Just as much as like its use and adaptability.
Awesome. Very cool. Thank you very much. And my final question here for you today is, if you could describe yourself in just 1 word, what would that word be?
Oh man, I don't know. I guess like I try to be genuine as much as possible.
Oh.
I don't pretend to be someone I'm not, and sometimes that it look bad and it looks good sometimes, but it's all fine with me. Like I don't really care. I'm just trying to be real. So I'm not. Yeah, I don't carry myself like to that or to the low. I'm right here.
Awesome. That's a fantastic answer. I always love just a lot of those questions usually just let us also see like, how would you approach a question like that too? And it's fantastic to go on that journey. So thank you very much. I really do appreciate that. And we're now at the very end of our show, which is my favorite segment. It's so lovingly called "So You Think You're a Designer," where we put your design skills to the test by asking you to recreate our Zeppelin logo in just 2 minutes using a web-based version of Microsoft Paint. So if you would like, you're welcome to share your screen and we can dive right into it whenever you're ready. And for those of you who are listening and maybe wanting to follow along, the website we're using is called jspaint.app. So here we are. It's true to form, a very beautiful depiction of what paint used to be like back in the 2000s. I can't even remember when this was. This was actually, yeah.
Windows 95 for sure.
Yeah, I love it. So whenever you are ready, you will have 2 minutes. It'll start as soon as the first pixel hits the canvas.
Can I pull a picture of your logo? Oh, actually, I have a little icon here so I can look at it.
There we go.
Okay.
All right. Yeah, study it for a little. Take however much time you need. This is all good.
Have we started
This
already?
no. Oh no. Yeah, you're good.
Okay.
This is all prep time. The time. I'll start the time as soon as your first pixel hits the canvas there.
I never touched the canvas. Okay, okay. All right, ready? I'm gonna go fill circle here, guys. Okay. Oh man, I'm already nervous.
All good. All good. Oh, okay. Wow. This is like the most paint skills that I've ever
Oh
seen.
really?
I like,
I used to. Oh man, that looked bad. I used to do a little MS Paint back in the day. I mean, I don't really have much else to do. Uh, I'm gonna. I'm just looking at your logo. Okay. Oh man. Ooh. I already feel the time going. Oh my gosh, that's so bad.
You're all good. You were all good on time.
Okay. Let's skew it a little bit.
Oh,
Isn't you
this is
guys rotated?
yes. This is I didn't even know about this feature, but I've seen it, and you're the second person who's used it. I've just got so impressed by it. Like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's like I used. Oh, yeah. I think that's what I want to do.
You've got about a minute left.
Okay, that's reassuring. I feel like I'm almost done.
Yeah, this is good. This is very good.
Let's use the eraser tool. I don't know. That looks something. Well, you got little swoopies, right? I don't know what you
Little
call them.
little swoopies, yes.
Little swoopies is what I'm gonna roll with. And I'm gonna, yeah, that looks good. I'm gonna go like that. Oh man, it's not even centered. And then I just clean up a little bit, I guess.
Yeah, you've got about 30 seconds left. So take as much time as you want to. You can add little details to it. You can do whatever you want with this time.
Don't you guys do little faces sometimes?
I bet that's my favorite part of it is when people add a smiley face like that. So
Okay.
I love that you did
It's
that.
a little crooked. I mean, I'm using this little thing, so. And then obviously you have Zeppelin, but I won't write that out. It's in the air, so maybe. Do I still have time?
Oh yeah, you're good.
Little shadows. Your cat. You're like floating
Oh,
off, I guess.
that's the first
Yeah.
shadow we've ever seen in the design. This is fantastic.
Okay. I think I'm pretty proud of that. I
This
mean,
is
it could
good.
be cleaned up a little bit, but
This is
I'm gonna do it
fantastic.
till you tell me to stop.
We're gonna. I just heard from my producers that will allow you to have a little bit more time if you want.
No, I'm done. I'm good.
All
I don't want to
right,
go into
sounds
it.
good.
If I touch it anymore, it's probably gonna look crappy.
That is perfect. If you can please export this, you should be able to like file export and send it to me once you're done. That would be fantastic.
Of
So
course.
I want to make a big. I tell everybody I'm like I want to make a big quilt out of all of them at the very end. I'm collecting them like infinity stones. So thank you very much. Well, fantastic. That brings us to the very end of the show. Brian, I want to thank you so much for being such a good sport today and for coming on and telling us all about what it's like at the Post, all about your journey, all about who you are, what your philosophies are when it comes to all these things. We really do appreciate your time. So if there's any last words of wisdom, anything else that you want to say to all the viewers, now is your chance. Please feel free to do so.
Yeah, I guess the last thing would be I forget where this quote came from, but somebody told me once, design like you give a damn.
That is good.
And that's always pushed me forward. Like I gotta care about what I do. So yeah, I'll leave that with the words of wisdom.
Awesome. I love it. I love it. Well, thank you very, very much. I can't wait to see more cool things that the Post does. It's always fantastic to hear from you too. So thank you very much for coming on our show. And I hope everybody has a great rest of your week today. Catch us next week, Wednesday, same time, 9:30 a.m. Pacific, where we'll be interviewing yet another guest. So please feel free to tune in there. Awesome. Well, thank you. It was great to have you, Brian. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and we will talk to you soon.
All right. Thank you so
Awesome.
much.
Take care, everybody. See you next time.